You thought the worst of spring was over. You were wrong. Another dangerous cold blast is now charging into the Midwest and Northeast, and meteorologists are warning this may become the most destructive frost event of the entire spring, not because it is the coldest, but because America's crops, orchards, and gardens are already hanging by a thread. This is no longer just another chilly night. This is wave 3 of a relentless atmospheric assault that has already battered millions of acres of vegetation across the United States. And now, the damage may become irreversible. For weeks, the country has been trapped inside one of the most violent temperature roller coasters in modern memory. January's polar vortex disaster killed dozens and caused billions in damage. Then came the warmest March in 132 years, followed immediately by record April heat that tricked plants, orchards, and farms into exploding into early growth weeks ahead of schedule. And then the atmosphere snapped. A brutal freeze wave crashed across the plains and Midwest, dropping temperatures into the 20s. Just days later, another surge of abnormal cold swept across the eastern half of the country. Crops barely surviving the first freeze were hit again before they could recover. Now the third strike is arriving, and experts warn this may be the wave that finally breaks already weakened vegetation across major agricultural regions. The danger tonight is not simply frost, it is cumulative frost trauma. Plants that survived previous cold waves are no longer healthy. Their cellular structure has already been damaged, their defenses are weakened, their new growth is fragile. What would normally be a harmless 34-degree morning could now destroy vegetation already pushed to the brink. This is why forecasters are sounding the alarm across the Midwest, Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, Appalachians, and Northeast. Apple orchards, peach trees, cherry crops, vineyards, vegetable farms, backyard gardens. Entire growing regions are now directly in the path of another dangerous temperature collapse. The situation is especially alarming because April's historic heat accelerated blooming by nearly a month in some states. Trees and crops entered vulnerable growth stages far too early. Farmers believed winter was over. Gardeners planted tomatoes, peppers, cucumbers, and basil weeks ahead of schedule. Now many of those plants may not survive the weekend. Meteorologists warn that some locations could experience temperature crashes of 50 to 60 degrees in less than 2 days. Conditions experts are calling meteorological whiplash. One day feels like July, 2 nights later feels like late winter. That kind of atmospheric violence is devastating to agriculture, and the economic consequences could explode far beyond home gardens. The Great Lakes Fruit Belt, the Finger Lakes wine region, Pennsylvania orchards, Virginia vineyards, and major farming corridors across the Midwest are all facing potentially severe crop stress. Some growers fear repeated frost waves may slash yields, weaken fruit quality, and trigger major financial losses later this season. In the Dakotas, Nebraska, and northern plains, winter wheat fields already damaged by earlier freezes are now staring down yet another blast of sub-freezing air. Temperatures could plunge into the upper 20s again for the third time this month. 3 freeze events in May. That is almost unheard of. And now, scientists are scrambling for solutions. Researchers are testing experimental biodegradable foam designed to shield crops from sudden freeze damage by trapping heat around vulnerable plants. The technology sounds futuristic, but it reflects a terrifying reality. America's weather patterns are becoming so unstable that traditional farming calendars are no longer reliable. The old rules are failing. Average last frost dates no longer guarantee safety. Warm spells are arriving earlier, cold air is returning later. The atmosphere is swinging between seasons with shocking violence, creating chaos for farmers, growers, and gardeners alike. Tonight, millions of Americans across the Midwest and Northeast are being urged to act immediately. Cover sensitive plants before sunset. Protect outdoor plumbing. Monitor local frost advisories county by county. Farmers are being told to assess orchard damage before the next freeze arrives, because by sunrise tomorrow morning, entire fields, vineyards, and gardens could look completely different. And perhaps the most unsettling part of all is this: forecasters do not believe this pattern is finished. The atmosphere remains highly unstable, and more temperature swings could continue deep into May. What began as an unusually warm spring has transformed into one of the most chaotic and punishing growing seasons in recent memory. This is not just a cold snap anymore. This is a season spiraling out of control. As darkness falls tonight, the atmosphere across the northern United States is once again setting the stage for silent destruction. Unlike tornadoes or hurricanes, frost does not announce itself with roaring winds or flashing lightning. It arrives quietly, invisibly. Temperatures slowly fall beneath critical thresholds while most people are asleep, unaware that damage is already unfolding across farms, orchards, vineyards, and backyard gardens. And by sunrise, the devastation can already be done. Meteorologists warn that some of the coldest pockets of air will settle into valleys, rural farmland, and low-lying communities across the Midwest and Northeast. These microclimates can become dramatically colder than nearby cities, meaning some growers may wake up to temperatures several degrees lower than forecast. That difference could determine whether crops survive or collapse. The highest danger zone tonight stretches from the Dakotas and Nebraska through Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, upstate New York, and into parts of New England. In many of these areas, vegetation is no longer dormant. Trees are blooming, vineyards are actively growing, gardens are already planted, and that is exactly why this cold wave is so dangerous. Fruit growers across the Great Lakes region are especially worried about orchards now entering the fruitlet stage, one of the most vulnerable phases of development. At this point, even a few hours of frost can scar developing fruit, reduce crop quality, or kill large portions of the harvest outright. For some farmers, the margin between profit and disaster may now come down to a single degree. Vineyards are also facing mounting fear tonight. Grapevines that already survived 2 separate frost attacks are now carrying tender new shoots with limited cold resistance. Another freeze could destroy primary buds and force vines into emergency recovery mode, dramatically lowering grape yields for the entire season. Some vineyard operators are already preparing for the possibility of a severely reduced 2026 harvest. Meanwhile, millions of home gardeners are now rushing to protect plants they believed were finally safe after April's record warmth. Across the Ohio Valley and Northeast, social media is filling with images of people covering tomatoes with blankets, buckets, tarps, frost cloths, and anything else capable of trapping heat through the night. Because many people have realized too late that this spring has been lying to them, the warmth felt permanent, the sunshine felt stable. But underneath it all, the atmosphere remained deeply unstable, capable of unleashing sudden winter-like air masses even in the middle of May. This is what meteorologists mean when they warn about false spring, and 2026 may become one of the most extreme examples in years. The pattern developing now is not normal seasonal variability. It is a repeated collision between lingering Arctic air and aggressive summer-like warmth surging northward across the country. Each clash creates violent swings in temperature that place enormous stress on ecosystems, agriculture, and infrastructure. In some regions, temperatures soared into the 80s and 90s just days before freeze warnings were issued. That kind of abrupt reversal creates the worst possible conditions for vegetation, because warm weather strips away natural cold resistance. Plants essentially believe summer has arrived, then winter suddenly returns. Forecasters say this repeated cycle of atmospheric shock is becoming one of the defining weather stories of 2026. The same unstable jet stream pattern responsible for severe storms, flooding, and temperature chaos is continuing to amplify across North America, and there are growing concerns that these extremes may continue through late spring and even into summer. Some long-range models are already hinting at additional powerful cold intrusions mixing with expanding heat domes later this month, a setup capable of producing both violent storms and further agricultural stress across the country. For now, though, attention remains focused on the next 12 to 24 hours, because tonight may determine the fate of countless crops, gardens, and orchards across the eastern United States. By tomorrow morning, some communities may escape with little damage. Others may wake up to blackened leaves, ruined blossoms, damaged vineyards, and fields permanently altered by yet another brutal temperature collapse. The atmosphere is still oscillating wildly, and America's growing season is now caught directly in the middle of it.